Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dr. Jennifer Donaldson-Novitska, and I'm the director of the Catholic Institute of Sacred Music. Welcome to St. Patrick's Seminary. I know that some of you had mentioned to me this is your first time here, so we hope it's your first of many times here. For some of the men, raise your hand if you're a seminarian. People live here. And we hope that you also feel at home here, even if you don't live here. We're very happy to have you here with us for this special event this evening. And after the event, just a little housekeeping, we hope that you'll join us for a small reception just in the back of the room. And you'd be able to pose your questions to Dr. Hughes, who is a lively conversationalist and will engage in all your questions. I just wanted to take a few moments to announce a couple of very exciting things. This last couple weeks ago now, right? 2-3 weeks ago, we just received final word that our entire graduate program has been approved by our accreditors, WASC. And so we offer a 36-credit Summers-based Master of Sacred Music degree program, as well as 2 post-baccalaureate certificates, which are essentially half of a master's, one in Gregorian chant and the other in sacred choral music. And even if you're not involved in the degree program or the certificate program, you are welcome to apply for graduate courses here and just take a class or 2. If you eventually apply to the program, those classes do count. And we're very excited to have you as part of this public lecture and concert series. This is our final event of this series, which has been really wonderful this semester, and you're in for a real treat this evening. I wanted to just preface this by saying that the seminarians who are here and I have had robust discussions about the role of leisure in life. And I think that this is a very important topic. What do we spend our time with, or on, or doing, or observing? I think there is a wonderful emphasis on things that are beautiful in the recent Catholic culture and way of discussing the faith. And part of this is the everydayness of interacting with things that have excellence and honor and beauty. And so I couldn't think of any better speaker to talk about this than someone who loves a philosopher that I hope you will love too. Josef Pieper is a profound thinker who is eminently relatable in the way that he conveys his ideas. And he brings together an emphasis on epistemology. How do we actually know something? And the receptive aspect of knowing. And that is the basis by which we enter into reality and a celebration of reality, which is true leisure. I would propose that there is a poverty of real leisure in our culture. And we instead replace it with things that are entertaining or engaging in some way, but that often leave us feeling exhausted or like we didn't really spend our time well, or we aren't really a better person for having done those things. And I think that one of the main things that beauty, and especially musical beauty, can help us do is tune into the nature of reality and how wonderful it is through the sense of hearing. And this is done, of course, in listening to excellent and beautiful music. And it's even more excellent to listen to excellent and beautiful music with friends, because there's something together of the facing beautiful things together that points us towards heaven. And I think that is probably what Dr. Hughes will talk to us about this evening. So without any further ado, please allow me to introduce our speaker this evening. Dr. Margaret Hughes is a native of Connecticut, and she is a graduate of the University of Chicago, where she earned her master's and doctoral degrees at Fordham University, studying Josef Pieper, among many other things, and with a very excellent Jesuit. Some of you might know him, Father Joe Koterski. I know some of you were close to him as well. And she taught undergraduate philosophy at Mount St. Vincent College in New York, and she has now been at Thomas Aquinas College for 5 years? 8 years. Oh boy, I've lost track of time. And I find her to be so engaging and so relatable in the imitation of Pieper, but in her own way. So I'm sure that you will enjoy this evening's lecture. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Margaret Hughes.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm so pleased to be here with you all. And I'm especially eager to hear your own insights on these ideas, maybe after the lecture in the Q&A or in the reception. So in our age of extraordinary invention, we have the luxury of almost ubiquitous music. Very often, we listen to it alone. Because of the ease with which music is recorded and replayed, it's always at our fingertips, in the car, when studying, getting up in the morning and going to bed at night, or even beyond our fingertips, as when music is piped into stores or train stations and is simply there in the background, whether we attend to it or not. But at the same time, often as we listen, we either are alone or we listen as if we are alone. So when I'm in a store with the latest corporate sound wash being piped in, I may become aware that there's music playing, but I never attend to the fact that others around me are hearing it as well. This is not a phenomenon with which most human beings in history could have been familiar. Prior to recorded music, the only music one could hear on one's own is the music made by oneself. All other music required other people being present for its making, and so there was always company in hearing music. Bishop Eric Varden, in his book, The Shattering of Loneliness, writes that ours is a society orphaned of transcendence. It's not a coincidence, I think, that ours is also a society of isolated listeners. In Dante's poetic description of paradise, in Fra Angelico's paintings of heaven, in Newman's account of angels as a soul rises to a glimpse of God, in the book of Revelation, listening to music together is part of the expression of the joy of the communion of saints in experiencing God. In these depictions, hearing music together is not the crux of heaven, right? That is being united to God in lovingly gazing on him. But it is one of its ornaments. What is ornamental in heaven, however, is not merely ornamental in this life. So while in this life we do not see God directly, and so do not experience the complete satisfaction of our desire to know him, with enough attentiveness, with enough careful seeing and hearing, we catch a glimpse of the way in which created things point to something beyond themselves. And music is one of the things that can do that. In a society orphaned of transcendence, however, we do not see that what is directly in front of us points to something other than itself. This means, too, that in a society orphaned of transcendence, my experience of what is directly in front of me, if it has any meaning at all, has meaning only for me. Your experience has no meaning for me, and mine has no meaning for you. We are separated from each other and God, and so we listen alone. But it's not good to be orphaned. An orphan, as countless children's tales tell us, is filled with longing for something that he has lost and wishes with all his might to regain. We too, I think, are filled with longing for something that we as a culture have lost and that we wish with all our might to regain, even if we try to cover over and ignore or escape that longing through the continual distractions of flashing lights and superficial noise and cheap physical sensations. What Josef Pieper calls the tawdry, empty stimuli that kill the receptivity of the soul. So in what follows, drawing on the insights especially of Josef Pieper and his teachers Thomas and Aristotle, I would like to remind us of one way, however small, of regaining our sense of transcendence, our sense of the meaning of things, through listening to music together. In listening to music together in a leisurely way, our eyes become opened so that we may see with more attention and depth the reality of things and that towards which they gesture. It's not the purpose of this talk to diagnose why we are a society orphaned of transcendence. The causes are legion. There are two causes, however, that I think may be helpful to highlight for our purposes. The first is that, surrounded by more and more complicated artifacts and fewer natural things, we have lost sight of the wondrous mysteriousness of life, and especially of our own capacity for an interior life that extends deeply and far into what is beyond itself. The second is closely related. We have lost sight of the marvelousness of the phenomenon of knowing. Considering these two together, life and knowing, will illuminate for us the profoundly important capacity for an interior life that human beings have that allows us to see the meaning of things, and with that, how profoundly important it is for human beings to enjoy leisure. Wonder, as Aristotle so famously observes, is the beginning of philosophy. Those who wonder see that there is something that is knowable, but that they do not yet know. That is, those who wonder see the mystery of things. A mystery is a mystery precisely because there is something about it that is knowable, even though, no matter how much of it is known, there will always be more to discover. Wonder, and seeing the mysteriousness of things, is the meeting of our desire to know with our recognition that we do not yet know. In our highly automated world, surrounded as we are by man-made things that do incredible feats, it's very easy not to appreciate the wondrousness and mystery of our own interior lives. Because we have complex machines that do very sophisticated things, and often do them better than human beings do, we can be habituated to thinking of human beings simply as complex machines. Because machines are man-made, they do not present a mystery to us. A human being has already understood it completely. There is not more to discover about it. Further, man-made machines are for the sake of achieving some goal other than their activity. They are always clearly for the sake of something else. It's very easy, surrounded as we are by such active but non-mysterious servile artifacts, to start to regard living things in the same way. We recognize that something is living because it is active, but so too are many machines. What sets a living thing apart from an artificial thing is that its activity is intrinsic to it. It originates from within the thing and emanates outward. The parts of a living thing develop from within that thing and are continually in motion together as they develop. Unlike a machine, a living thing is not simply a pile of parts that are collected and then set in motion. So you cannot take an arm and a heart and a spinal cord and stick them together and then bring them into life. A living thing acts as a whole by a cause that is within the thing prior to the development of any parts. And because a living thing engages in activity as a unified whole, a living thing enters into relations with what is outside of it in a profoundly different way than do machines. This is especially true of those things that can sense and think. So as Aristotle writes, life seems to be principally an act of perception or thought. Life is a dynamic activity that allows for interior relations with exterior things. The more deeply a living thing is related to things other than itself, the more living it is. Through sense powers, animals receive into themselves some quality of an object outside of them. Animals' living activity means that they experience. It makes sense to try to imagine what it's like to be an animal. It does not make sense to try to imagine what it's like to be a computer. And along with sense experience comes a felt bodily response from within, that is, the passions. So animals respond to sense objects with pleasure, with fear, with anger. Their living activity, which originates from within them, not from a single part, but from the thing as a whole, permeates their whole in response to the physical things external to them, but available to their perception, such that they have an inner and an outer. Of all material things, though, human beings have the deepest inner of all and the broadest capacity for outer. This is because human beings can know intellectually. To know intellectually is to know through the power of the intellect rather than merely the sense powers. The relation of knowing is one of union. Whereas with sense knowledge, what is in the perceiver is the quality of the object as received by the senses. With intellectual knowledge, what is in the knower is the form of the object. The form is what gives a thing its identity as that kind of thing. Consequently, the form of a thing also makes it intelligible. It is what the intellect abstracts from the particular material instantiations of the thing in order to form an understanding of what it is. When a person apprehends the form of a thing, it really becomes a part of him because it's now held in his mind. The thing is really there in the knower because the form by which he knows it is in him, albeit in a different way than it exists in the world. Thus, in knowing what is true, the person takes reality into himself. He is only fully satisfied in his knowledge of the truth then, when he knows all that is. Intellectual activity, therefore, is both the most outward-looking and most interior of all living activity. His outward capacity allows him to apprehend things as good, not simply as an experience of this good or that good as another animal can, but an apprehension of the good as such. From this follows that he has a will, his rational appetite that inclines him towards the good. Just as the aim of the intellect is to know the truth, the aim of the will is to possess the good. And because human beings are animals, they too undergo passions. Unlike other animals, however, who only experience passions in response to what they sense, human beings can also experience passions in response to intellectual objects. We can feel pleasure in the warmth of sunshine. We can also delight in a geometrical proof. We can sorrow at a bruised knee, and we can sorrow at the death of a loved one. When the will attains its end, the good, which the intellect apprehends as good, we feel delight. When the will is deprived of its end, and the intellect apprehends that lack of good, we feel sorrow. Within this framework, there's much room for a deeply colored life of passions in response to the multiplicity of objects each human being encounters in reality. This capacity for an interior life that can be dynamically related to all that is makes it possible for human beings to be at leisure. Leisure, however, is not merely one possibility among many for human beings. It is central to a life lived fully. In a world in which a sense of transcendence is lost and work is privileged, activity is often presumed to be synonymous with work, and rest is simply the cessation of activity for the sake of getting back to work. But this understanding of activity does not do justice to the wondrousness of our interior lives. It may lead us even to see our interior lives as for the sake of work and worthwhile only if we are exerting effort, as we might do in discursive thought. So discursive thought, Pieper writes, is the ability to search, investigate, abstract, specify, and infer. It requires effort and labor on the part of the knower. Discursive thought entails constantly advancing from one piece of knowledge to another. This form of thinking, of course, it's important, but it's not yet the fullness of man's interior activity because that activity has not reached its end. The fulfillment of man, on the other hand, involves the activity of knowing that is at once active and restful. It is seeing reality. Whereas discursive thought is akin to the eyes glancing around here and there, searching for an object onto which to fix their gaze, this kind of restful knowing that is leisure is akin to the eye's penetrating gaze. When the eyes rest on an object, they continue to see, and to see even more intensely. In the same way, the intellect rests when its proper activity has its proper object, and so its activity may intensify. This intensification, though, is not an intensification of effort. It's an intensification of the activity of receptivity. Beings who are capable of leisure, who have the capacity for intense receptive activity, are meaning-seeking beings. A meaning tells us ultimately what something is. Meaning, then, is deeply bound to reality and dependent on it. We know the meaning of a word when we know not the word, but the thing. And to know a thing means that we know its cause, what it is that makes that thing the thing. And to know a thing means, he discovers and dwells on meaning. It's a deeply interior activity. It's an activity that engages the intellect in the knowing of reality, and the will in resting in the good of knowing, and the passions in a response to the resting of the will. Leisure then requires a disposition of openness to what is before us, a willingness to look outside ourselves and to receive what is there into us, not for the sake of some use, or even for the sake of discovering something else, or even for pleasure, but simply because it's good to do so. The leisurely man is an outward-looking one. He forgets himself, not in the sense of stamping out himself or obliterating himself, but rather in the sense of being so caught up in the good of knowing what is before him that his whole focus is simply on that good. He's so taken up, so enraptured by knowing the object, that he does not attend to himself. Paradoxically, however, this is also when he is most fully himself. In this life, however, we cannot live most and completely fully. As meaning-seeking beings, we want to know what a thing is, and so we want to know its cause. We only know fully the meaning of a thing when we know its cause, when we know why it is. But, as Thomas observes, and Pieper quotes this repeatedly, in this life, the exertions of all the philosophers combined have not yet been sufficient to track down the essence of even a single mosquito. Although we can recognize that things have essences, and although we can get to an essential knowledge of things by grasping their substantial forms, we do not yet know any one essence fully. The source of a thing's essence is its creator. The thing as it appears to us in the world, however, is a likeness, a mere semblance of the divine idea. In gazing on the thing, a man does not see the divine idea itself. He sees only the created effect of that idea, that is, the beings that have been brought into existence as a result of the divine ideas. What he sees is a shadowy correspondence to the pattern in the divine mind. All leisure, then, which must be rooted in our seeking the meaning of things through intellectual looking, entails encountering mystery and responding with wonder. It is bound up with a sense of transcendence. No matter how much we know, no matter how long we gaze on what is, we will never be completely fully living, because there will always be more to see. And in seeing in leisure what is before us is mysterious, we are moved to a desire to understand it more deeply, to wonder about it. So in leisure, we see and rejoice in the meaning of things, while left with a longing to see the cause of their meaning. To be at leisure, then, to be actively at rest, we need an object on which we may focus that will engage our faculties in their proper activity for its own sake. Leisure requires an object that is worthy of our attention. It is worthy if it deepens our interior activity such that our inner life is moved to activity in which all our parts are ordered to their proper end and operating in harmony. The whole of our interior life becomes more actively united in its focus on that object. At the same time, since our only full, complete, genuine rest and leisure occurs when our object is God, when we are seeing God face to face in the beatific vision, in this life, the object that elicits leisurely activity from us must also point beyond itself, from creation to the Creator. It must bring us rest and leave us with longing. In what follows, I would like to suggest that such an object is good music when we listen to it attentively, simply for the sake of hearing it. Music, Josef Pieper writes, is one of the most amazing and mysterious phenomena of all the world's Miranda, the things that make us wonder. In our age of ubiquitous music, it's possible to lose sight of the mysteriousness of music, just as it is possible to lose sight of the mysteriousness of our interior lives. The two are closely connected. The mysteriousness of music becomes manifest to us because we are living. The mysterious way in which it moves our living activity brings our attention to the mystery of the phenomenon of music itself. As music first begins to play, already there is something mysterious happening. We are constantly surrounded by noise. Even in a concert hall, once the lights have dimmed and the rattling of programs has ceased, there is still sound. The slight creak of a chair, the shuffle of a foot, the soft tumble of a coat settling into place, maybe even the slight buzz of a heater. Such noises mean little to us and do not grasp our attention. But as the first notes of the performance begin to sound, we are pulled to this noise. Music, unlike other sounds, immediately draws our ears, and with our ears, our whole attention. There's something different about this sound than about any other sounds around us. And so music immediately activates our external sense of hearing, but in such a way that our will follows suit and focuses our attention on it. The end of our hearing is what's audible. The end of our will is the good. When music begins to play, our ears are attracted to their object, what is audible. But there's something unique about this object, such that it also moves our will to continue to focus our attention on listening in a more intensified, more acute way than we do to other sounds. In that attention, it is not only our ears that are fixed on music, but through the attraction of the will to the good of our ears, our intellects become engaged. We listen not only with the organs that are our ears, but with our other receptive capacities. The will reaches out for receiving the good that is first the activity of our hearing, but in that hearing, our intellect too is activated, and so the will continues to reach out to receive the good of the intellect. And in response to that attention and receptivity, our passions are stirred. We have a felt experience within our interior in response to what is sounding outside of us. That passionate, felt response gathers together the body so that the attention of the intellect can be more profoundly focused on what is being received, which shores up the movement of the will towards that good, and so also the focus of the ears on the music intensifies. The whole of man's rational activity, both the activity of his rational powers and also his powers or responses that can have a share in those powers, are caught up together in attending to and receiving the music. His interior life is united, all together in its focus on receiving and responding to the sound that is without, and yet also in his listening enters into him. His living activity, his interior dynamism, intensifies in listening to music. Our interior enlivening in hearing good music comes from being focused outward. But the object on which we are focused is a strange one. Whereas if we were focusing on a painting, we could point to it. There before us because it's unmoving and stable. But we cannot point to a piece of music. It is not unmoving and it's not stable. Rather, an essential aspect of music is that it is constantly in motion, moving from one tone to another. The material of music is sounds occurring in time and considered in relation to each other. These sounds are tones. So the word tone has a strange etymology. So it comes from the Greek noun tonus, which is related to a verb that means to stretch, and the noun means tension. Tones, then, are noises that somehow hold or cause tension through stretching. Stretching, however, and the tension that follows from it are only possible with direction. So stretching and tension are directed towards rest. The context of a tone gives it its direction. A tone on its own, divorced from any context, has no tension, and so is not really a tone. So if you think just of hitting a note on a keyboard, there's no direction, it's just a note. But that note succeeded by a note, say a sixth interval up from it, introduces direction. Suddenly there's tension. Perhaps not much yet because the context is not clear, and yet the relation between the original tone and the sixth up pulls us, makes us desire either a step down to the fifth or a third up to the octave. And then, when we finally come back to our first tone, the tension that is built up, that is stirred desire for that tone, is satisfied, and we feel not tension, but rest. All tonal music, then, entails both tension and rest, both stretching out towards an end, perhaps falling short of it at times, but also coming to rest in it. It stirs desire for an end and delight in reaching that end. Without the stretching out, the stirring of desire, there is no end and no rest. And without at least the hint of and promise of rest, there is no stretching out and no desire. At the center of the movement of music, then, is the tonic, the tone from which all the motion of music goes out and returns. The tonic is determined by the set of pitches that the music uses. All the motion of music is determined by the unfolding of tones in relation to the central, restful, foundational tone. There is an order to the sound. Order gives intelligibility, and so the order of tones engages the intellect. When we hear music, then, we are weaving together our memory of the past with the experience of the present and our expectation of the future in response to this order. The tones that have just sounded remain with us in memory, so give context to this tone sounding now, and those together form an expectation in the present for the tones that will occur in the future. And our expectation being fulfilled or surprised colors how we hear the tones in the present and how they then recede into our memory, which then shapes our experience of the present and expectation of the future. Without any deliberate choice on our part, we reach out intellectually to find the order in the tones. In that attentive listening engagement with a piece of music in which we enter into a dynamic relation with the tones, then, we also experience our own inner dynamism. Pieper writes, "Music articulates the inner dynamism of man's existential self, which is music's prime matter, so to speak. In listening to music, we experience the interplay between the senses, the intellect, the will, the passions. In the single activity that is listening to music, we experience the intertwining, the push and pull of our different interior motions. We are carried along by the music through its highs and lows, the intricacies of its tensions and rests, its crescendos and resolutions, such that what occurs in the music is echoed in our own interior motions. Leisurely listening to music enlivens us for our own sake. Music, in engaging our interiors, the intellect, the will, the passions, in the push and pull of tones ordered ultimately around rest, delights us, not simply because of the good of the ear or the good of the intellect, but because of the good of living. Thomas, following Aristotle, writes that someone should be conscious that he is alive is numbered among the goods that are delightful in themselves, because life is by its nature good, and the consciousness that he possesses good is delightful. Music delights us because living delights us. Listening to music, then, brings to our attention that life is good, and that, just as our response to music is a response to something given in the music, not a deliberate construction on the part of the listener, so too our living activity is not for something that we construct, but something that we receive. Our listening to music, the deeply active engagement of our interior faculties in receiving and responding to the order through time of the tones, shows us through our responsiveness that our life is given. We find ourselves already with the capacity to enter into dynamic relations with what is external. If life is given, then there is a giver who desires it, and so who, without any first activity of our own, regards our lives as good. The rest that is central to the tones is an image of the rest, the leisure, that is central to our lives. While the tones make sense only if there's a central, restful tone, our lives only make sense if there's a central, restful activity. Listening to music in leisure shows us that we are meaning-seeking beings and that there is meaning to be sought. While in listening to music, our interior lives echo the motions of music. The motions of music towards rest are a sign of the dynamic unfolding of our whole lives towards our fulfillment in the sight of God. As Gerard Manley Hopkins writes of Henry Purcell's music, "Meaning motion fans fresh our wits with wonder." When we listen to good music, it enlivens us such that we are moved, not only beyond ourselves, but beyond even the music itself. We are moved to silence, to listening, to receiving what is beyond us, beyond our control, and yet deeply desired by us. The silence at the end of a beautifully played piece of music is pregnant. It's a silence full of promise, pointing to something to which we reach out and do not yet fully grasp. In that moment of silence, we're continuing to listen, to be open to receiving the good that is already there before us, even after the music has ended. And yet, in that silence, there's a danger. It is the danger of frustration that can lead to the misery of loneliness and being turned in on oneself. Music, in its intelligibility and order, points to an orderer, not only the composer, but the orderer who provides the composer with the material of the natural tones from which he composes. And so the silence that comes at the end of music is the wordless, noiseless experience of reaching out for the giver of order, the very origin of meaning. It makes us long for another. Bishop Varden quotes a poem by Mong Kao Yen, which Mahler set to music. I long, O my friend, to enjoy by your side this evening's loveliness. Where are you? You leave me waiting long. And then Bishop Varden asks, who has not yearned for someone just to sit like that by our side and be moved by what moves us? These experiences manifest the truth of Aristotle's assertion in the Nicomachean Ethics that no one would choose to have the whole world if he had to live alone. While, as we have already seen, life seems to be principally an act of perception or thought, we do not want to perceive and think alone. Our interior lives, oriented as they are towards union, desires the deepest union possible. We desire reciprocation in union. Because we have interior lives, we desire to be in communion. We can only be in communion with others who have interior lives, who can respond to our own interior dynamism with a dynamism of their own. While knowing brings a union with anything that is known, not everything that is known offers communion. It is only communion when the union is reciprocated. In communion, we rest in knowing while also being known. Another way to say this is that we can only be happy, be fulfilled with friends. In the beatific vision, of course, we are satisfied by our friendship with God. But even in heaven, Thomas says, we will have other friends, not, he explains, because they are necessary for our happiness, but because they are conducive to happiness. He quotes Augustine, the spiritual creatures receive no other interior aid to happiness than the eternity, truth, and charity of the Creator. But if they can be said to be helped from without, perhaps it is only by this, that they see one another and rejoice in God at their fellowship. Our joy is full in the sight of God, but that joy can pour over not just to our bodies in the resurrection, but also to our friends in the sharing of the joy of God with our friends and our friends with God. In this life, however, we do not yet enjoy the sight of God, and so friends are necessary for our growth in happiness. That is, friends are necessary in this life for our fullest living activity. We do not see God, we see our friends. And yet, as we come to know them, we discover that there's even more that we do not yet know. It is not that our friends are unknowable, but by virtue of their interior lives that are dynamic, growing, constantly deepening, we do not grasp them fully. As we interact with them, we are always engaged in the dynamic, growing, constant deepening of our own interior lives in coming to know their own, which, in turn, in response to our lives, become more dynamic, grow, and deepen. The principal act of friends, Aristotle and Thomas state, is to live with them. The activity of friendship is the activity of living together. And since living is most properly perception or thought, the activity of friendship is especially the activity of perceiving or thinking together with our friends. In doing so, the friends each engage in interior living activity with an object of perception or thought, and yet also through the commonality of the object and their friendship, they are not left alone in their interior lives, but share in a communion. When we listen to music with friends, then, our interior activity is intensified even more. Friends are an occasion for listening intently to music, and listening to music is an occasion for the activity of friendship. Together, they give us a glimpse, a promise, of what the sight of God in the fellowship of friends will be like, in allowing us to experience the transcendence of creation in communion. With a friend, there's an inducement to listen to music with even more attentiveness and openness. Friends, being other selves, desire to share all in common, including most especially life. When, therefore, my friend is listening to music, I am aware that he, too, is experiencing an enlivening that is at once like mine and different. There is something beyond my own experience in his experience. But since he is my friend, I desire to know him and to experience what he experiences. And so I listen to the music, conscious not only of my own interior activity, but also of the fact that my friend is experiencing interior activity that is not my own. This leads to listening to music with the awareness that there is more to hear than I am hearing. There is also the listening and responding that my friend is doing in his own interior life. Music, engaging as it does the senses and the intellect and the will, and consequently the passions, is an occasion for becoming aware of the particular nuances of another's feeling in response to the tension and rest, the weal and woe of the music, and so of his inner life. They cannot be called friends, Aristotle writes, when unaware of one another's feelings. Thomas elaborates that a friend shares intimately in the joys and sorrows of his friend. In listening to music together, music which moves us to joy and sorrow in its rest and tension, in its concordance and discordance, friends share in the movement of joy and sorrow together. Doing so, resting together in listening to music for its own sake, communicates love. Love, Pieper writes, is a way of turning to someone or something and saying, "It's good that you exist. It's good that you are in this world." Love based on the good of someone's usefulness, his talents, his achievements, is not love of the person, it is love of his use or talents or achievements. Genuine love sees the good of the person simply. It rejoices that he is. It delights in his living for its own sake. When friends listen to music together simply to enjoy it, to live through it together because it is good to do so, they wordlessly express love to each other. They rest not just in the good of the ordered unfolding of music, but also in the good of living with each other. Each conveys to the other that his life is good, is desirable, is lovable, simply for its own sake. This sharing points to a meaning of the music and of the joy and sorrow that it elicits beyond each individual's own interior experience. That friends can experience this wordless communication in the sharing of music shows that music has a meaning that is given neither by one friend or the other. Rather, both are encountering that meaning together in their separate interior lives, conjoined through their love and knowledge of each other. They are reminded that they are not mere machines made only for some utilitarian purpose. In listening to music, simply to listen to it for its own sake, they live together and experience together the dynamic unfolding of their lives towards God. Thank you. I think. Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to hear how, at Thomas Aquinas College, how you promote listening to music with friends. I know, like, at my own Catholic, I don't think they have any cell phones, and they just have live music or something.
Interesting. So a lot of it is organic. So I think so part of what we do is first try to set up life so that it is communal, so that we eat together. We spend a lot of time talking about the ideas together, talking about reality together. And then our students come to us with such beautiful formations, having already learned to enjoy music. And so just as they develop friendships, that becomes expressed in what they do together. And so that's especially just out of their friendship, they come together to make music, and then others will listen to it. So it happens really organically, I think. I don't know if Tanner, do you have thoughts on that? So Tanner is a graduate from a couple years ago.
Yeah, so in addition to all of the organic communal music making, in addition to all the organic communal music making and that just happens around bonfires in the life of a student at TAC, there's also a music course which was summarized beautifully in the lecture, where students look into the nature of music and further grasp the good that is there present in the music. And then there's also a lecture and concert series where we listen to lectures such as this one, and then also listen to live music together as a whole school.
Thank you. That's a much more complete answer.
Sorry, can I go first? You would say the receptivity of the human soul that accompanies leisure is the highest expression of you would call the inner dynamism of the human being or the human soul body composite. But I'm wondering if that receptivity is strictly listening. What about why isn't this talk entitled singing with your friends instead of listening to music with your friends or making music with your friends? And I'm wondering if you can comment on, you might say we talked about machines versus organic substances. And it's funny because music is an art. And all these quote-unquote organic experiences at TAC are indeed arts. And so what is the ontological distinction between something like a piece of a tree and a violin made from a tree that is in fact an artifact, if you want to call it a machine? And an organ might even be a more machine-like than a violin, perhaps. And then when it comes to listening to music, you even have this next level of, it's almost an ontologically lower level of a recording of, an artifact being played that sort of mimics this thing like the human voice, which mimics this thing like the music in heaven. So I'm wondering about these ontological levels, especially when it comes to recorded music and even electronically generated recordings of music, which oftentimes are what you end up resorting to when you listen to music with friends. So where does singing with friends fall in this ontology or this ontological spectrum? And maybe does that have a place in the scope and sequence of a well-ordered human life?
I think, certainly it does. So as to why this talk is not about making music with friends, I was going to ask Dr. Donaldson to include this in her introduction, and then I forgot. It's because I am not a musician, and so it makes me quite nervous to talk about making music in front of people who are so good at it and have so much more experience than I do. So it's for a matter of expertise. I have much more experience listening to music than making music. And I think, so I haven't thought about kind of what each might add differently. That would be a good sequel. And it seems to me that so it's just watching our students play music together. It seems to me that there's maybe even a deeper communication. It's really amazing to watch really good musicians be able to play off of each other, and they seem to know what the other is thinking just by listening to the music that they're making. So it might be that's maybe even a deeper occasion for communion than simply listening. Let's see. And as to recorded music, well, when you don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good, and so if you don't get to live in a beautiful place like Menlo Park in San Francisco, where there are lots of live performances, you need to rely on recordings. But I think it's true that there's something lost in listening to recordings. This is just speculation. There are probably people in the room who understand this so much better than I do. But I have a suspicion, I don't know, maybe Dr. Donaldson can confirm whether this is a good suspicion or not, that the overtones in a live performance seem to be richer, and so that we're actually hearing more complexity in a live performance than in a recording. It seems like there's something about, even though there are of course there are some overtones, right, playing because they're just overtones and all sound. In recordings, they're muted, and so there's just actually not as much to hear in a recording, I think. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't listen to recordings. Hopefully what it means is when we listen to recordings, and if we're listening so attentively, when finally we get to hear a live performance, it's that much more satisfying. I don't know if did that address?
I think it's interesting that, are there any other organic substances that make music besides creatures like us? You have the birds, and you have, I guess, things like other animals. And it seems like instead of this passivity being the expression, full expression of human dynamism, really is this sort of activity of actually participating in the great song of heaven through the human voice. And there's something that is lost ontologically when you have an instrument which is almost ontologically once removed from the music made by an organic substance that then made music.
Oh, that's interesting. That might be, I'd want to think about that some, but I think there must be something important happening in the human being when he's singing, because the music is in him, right? There's the physical reverberations are in him as opposed to in the instrument. But I think I'd really want to defer to the people who have a lot more experience playing. There might be violinists in the room right now who are thinking angry thoughts. I think that's a wonderful thing to think about. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that in recording it's not really praise. Yeah, it's not present, and so it's not genuine praise, right? So praise, right, needs to come from the living, right, the living being who can see the good and then respond to it. Yeah.
Thank you for being here tonight, Dr. Hughes. My question for you is simple but potentially complicated. What is your favorite piece of music and why?
Oh my goodness. Oh, I wasn't expecting that question either.
It's okay, the other songs won't judge you.
You know, so much depends on the context. And also, it's kind of like asking, what is your favorite novel? Well, it sort of depends on what else is swirling around you at the moment. right? So at different times, different pieces of music sort of resonate more and can bring more rest or leisure, more catharsis, depending on what's swirling around. So I may not answer the question.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I love movies. It's so easy to say that I love like The Lord of the Rings, I love Scott Pilgrim versus the World, but if I always have one that I'm prepared to say is my favorite if asked the question, for me it's always going to be Tombstone. So is there kind of like when you think of music, is there just that one song that you always think of when someone says music?
Okay, well, at the moment, I've been on a Marriage of Figaro kick. And I've just been listening to the Marriage of Figaro over and over again. I've been listening to the Marriage of Figaro and then Don Giovanni and then back to the Marriage of Figaro because I'd like to figure out which one I like more, and I'm not sure yet. Don Giovanni?
Yes. So I guess I'm one of the violinists or former violinists in the room. And
Are you one of the ones thinking angry thoughts?
Not necessarily angry thoughts, but just to address the question about playing music versus listening to music. It's kind of a different experience in that when you're playing it with people, it's more tactile, it's more immediate. Especially like as a violin, if you're in the first violin, then you get a lot of the melody, so you get a lot of the fun parts. On the other hand, you can be kind of focused on playing your part as opposed to like appreciating and absorbing the whole sometimes, especially if as a musician it's something you're struggling with. And then if you're on some of the like more harmony related parts, I also sing tenor and choir, then sometimes you get notes, they're a bit more filler and they're not the melody. So it's not so much the joy of singing the melody, it's more the joy of like harmonizing with it. So it is kind of different experiences for playing with other people versus listening to music. When you're listening, you can absorb it, though you can also get more passive and you can get distracted. Whereas if you're playing it's harder to get distracted, but you can get very focused on your part.
Oh, that's so interesting. Do you have, do you have experience of singing as well? Singing in parts?
Yes, singing tenor.
Is the same true for singing as it is for playing the violin? So when you're singing, do you also lose a sense of the whole?
Yeah, because I'm a much worse singer than I am a violinist. So a lot of the time I'm focused on getting my part right.
Huh. Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes, for your talk. I wanted to mention when you talked about philosophy in the beginning, the first thing that came to mind was Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton, where he discovers England from totally new perspective.
Yeah, isn't it a wonderful? It's such
that
a wonderful image.
I just I picked it up just recently and started reading it again, and it's a wonderful explanation of how he became convinced of Catholicism. So I just wanted to mention that because that will help us to develop this sense of wonder that you talked about, and how important that is to appreciate the fact that that we exist, that each one of us exist, and each one of us is a song that God made, and it's our mission to reach that song, which is heaven. So again, talking about, you mentioned how, machines are just, they have no, machines have no meaning to us. They're just like, they have a purpose, pencils to write with. AI is to get us to a point, to get us to a goal. Whereas a human being is meant to be in heaven, to be with God. That's a source of meditation right there, that you can just, So I think there's an insecurity, especially living here in the Silicon Valley, where there's so much technology, so much like, importance on, I can compute this much in, whatever, in a second or millisecond. There is an insecurity there that, is it okay to be human? And I remember my son here, Junipero, he was telling me that, he was saying that, my children, that my children in the future, I'm going to have to decide whether or not I will accept them to have a chip put in their brain. So, he's thinking about the future of his children. So I'm just saying that that's like a sense of what the insecurity we have as human beings, like, each one of us, do we feel like we are enough as we are, like as is?
Yeah.
Do we see the our sense of how important we are in God's eyes?
Mm-hmm.
And so then going from there, then I think that's why listening, I think both are, listening and playing, producing music are both one of, the same thing. So listening is actually very important. I was on a El Camino pilgrimage last year, walked from, in France, a town called Puy-en-Velay to Conques we walked 120 miles. My husband and I were celebrating our 25th anniversary. And we stayed at this auberge, and this gentleman said to us, one of the things you can do on the El Camino pilgrimage is to focus on one sense, your five senses, which he had focused on his seeing. And so I decided to focus on hearing. And I kid you not, I heard so much beautiful bird songs. I didn't play an instrument, I didn't sing, maybe a little bit, but just listening to the bird songs was beautiful. So before I forget, I just want to mention two more things. I'm sorry, I don't want to take too long, but... Oh, sorry. I just wanted to mention the beautiful bells at Redwood Valley Monastery that we visited. Beautiful, they're gifts from Belgium. And I just, because it's such a beautiful sound, and it reverberated in the Redwood Valley, and it just permeated my soul. And the other thing was, I forgot what the other thing was. Well, I don't remember the other thing.
Oh,
but
this is
anyway, how important it is to listen. To listen. I think it's still very important to listen, and then from there to have the motivation to make your music.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm always so edified by the link that you make between music and philosophy as a habitus, a way of being. And one of the things we've talked about with the seminarians is how to listen to music. It becomes more enjoyable when you can enter more fully into precisely what you were talking about, that you can hold in your memory what you heard, be in the moment, and anticipate what's coming. But that requires a little bit of skill, in the same way that reading does, or that thinking through a philosophical argument does. And so, being primarily a philosopher, I would be really grateful to hear how you think about cultivating people's capacity to remember where you've been on the intellectual journey, where you are at this moment in an argument or a contemplation of something, and to project where it's going. And as perhaps a model that can be taken at various stages in one's ability to listen to music. There's certainly an enjoyment that could come from a novice listener and a more advanced listener. So what is your experience of that in philosophy?
Oh, so you're asking about how, so...
Yeah, how do you cultivate it?
How do you kind of cultivate that philosophical...
Yes, I mean, as a teacher, I'm sure you think about that all the time.
Well, I think, so, and certainly this is what I have seen from teaching. I think that the first thing to do that's very helpful is to encounter nature. So even before reading or thinking or talking, is simply to have experience of the natural world, because we need experience of the things that lead us to knowledge. That we need experience of the things about which we philosophize. And then I think, so experience of the natural world, and then letting yourself wonder at it, asking questions. I often encourage my students to keep a list of the questions that occur to them. So often in class, I mean, it's always the case, that our students get frustrated that we have not done everything thoroughly, that there's just always more to see and to talk about. And so I'll encourage students to keep a list of their questions so that they can keep coming back to them. And as they grow in their study and their understanding and come back to those questions again and again, they'll still be able to mark sort of how they have grown, how they have come to understand more and more. And then I think having a trustworthy guide, so having a friend who's maybe a few steps further down the path, is very helpful. So someone who can help guide reading and enter into conversation. So those are, I think, I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but those are some of the things that come to mind. Yeah. Well.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And I hope that you all will enjoy a reception with us. But let's give our gratitude to Dr. Hughes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.